I am picking up my reading on page 242 in the paperback book, down at the bottom paragraph. There were also memories of another kind. They stood out in his mind disconnectedly, like pictures with blackness all around them. He was in a cell which might have been either dark or light, because he could see nothing except a pair of eyes. Near at hand, some kind of instrument was ticking slowly and regularly. The eyes grew larger and more luminous. Suddenly, he was floated out of his seat, dived into the eyes, and was swallowed up. He was strapped into a chair surrounded by dials under dazzling lights. A man in a white coat was reading the dials. There was a tramp of heavy boots outside. The door clanged open. The waxen-faced officer marched in, followed by 2 guards. "Room 101, said the officer. The man in the white coat did not turn around. He did not look at Winston either. He was looking only at the dials. He was rolling down a mighty corridor, a kilometer wide, full of glorious golden light, roaring with laughter and shouting out confessions at the top of his voice. He was confessing everything, even the things he had succeeded in holding back under the torture. He was relating the entire history of his life to an audience who knew it already. With him were the guards, the other questioners, the men in white coats, O'Brien, Julia, Mr. Sherrington, all rolling down the corridor together and shouting with laughter. Some dreadful thing which had lain embedded in the future had somehow been skipped over and had not happened. Everything was all right. There was no more pain. The last detail of his life was laid bare, understood, forgiven." This doesn't sound real, does it? I don't think that Winston at this point is able to distinguish between reality and delusion. He is so messed up at this point. And so he says memories of another kind, and I think what he's talking about are actually dreams. They're not really memories. And, O'Brien's there with him, and Julia's there with him, and they're confessing things, and he says at the end of the paragraph on page 243 that we just read, some dreadful thing which had laid embedded in the future had somehow been skipped over and had not happened. And I think that is an indicator that something is about to happen, because he's having a dream that we're leading this torture up to this moment, and then for some reason in his dream we've skipped over it and everything is forgiven without having to undergo that specific torture. But I think he knows that that is not what's reality, and that he does have to go through that torture. And a couple of our classes talked about what the torture is going to be, and some of us didn't. But we already know, we as the readers, we know what the torture will be for him, specifically in room 101. We know what's behind that door because we've encountered it already. I think 6th period will know what I'm talking about. But you'll find out pretty quickly. He was starting up from the plank bed in the half-certainty that he had heard O'Brien's voice. All through his interrogation, although he had never seen him, he had had the feeling that O'Brien was at his elbow, just out of sight. It was O'Brien who was directing everything. It was he who set the guards onto Winston and who prevented them from killing him. It was he who decided when Winston should scream with pain, when he should have a respite, when he should be fed, when he should sleep, when the drug should be pumped into his arm. It was he who asked the questions and suggested the answers. He was the tormentor, he was the protector, he was the inquisitor, he was the friend. And once Winston could not remember whether it was in drugged sleep or in a normal sleep, or even in a moment of wakefulness, a voice murmured in his ear, "Don't worry, Winston, you are in my keeping. For 7 years I have watched over you. Now the turning point has come. I shall save you, I shall make you perfect." He was not sure whether it was O'Brien's voice, but it was the same voice that had said to him, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness," in that other dream 7 years ago. He did not remember anything. He did not remember any ending to his interrogation. There was a period of blackness, and then the cell or room in which he had now gradually materialized around him. He was almost flat on his back and unable to move. His body was held down at every essential point. Even the back of his head was gripped in some manner. O'Brien was looking down at him gravely and rather sadly. His face, seen from below, looked coarse and worn, with pouches under the eyes and tired lines from nose to chin. He was older than Winston had thought him. He was perhaps 48 or 50. Under his hand there was a dial with a lever on top and figures running round the face. "I told you," said O'Brien, "that if we met again, it would be here." "Yes," said Winston. Without any warning except a slight movement of Brian's hand, a wave of pain flooded his body. It was a frightening pain because he could not see what was happening, and he had the feeling that some mortal injury was being done to him. He's being electrocuted. He did not know whether the thing was really happening or whether the effect was electrically produced, but his body was being wrenched out of shape. The joints were being slowly torn apart. Although the pain had brought the sweat out on his forehead, the worst of all was the fear that this backbone was about to snap. He set his teeth and breathed through his nose, trying to keep silent as long as possible. "You are afraid," said O'Brien, watching his face, "that in another moment something is going to break. Your especial fear is that it will be your backbone. You have a vivid mental picture of the vertebrae snapping apart and the spinal fluid dripping out of them. That is what you are thinking, is it not, Winston?" Winston did not answer. O'Brien drew back the lever on the dial. The wave of pain receded almost as quickly as it had come. "That was 40, said O'Brien. "You can see that the numbers on this dial run up to 100. Will you please remember, throughout our conversation, that I have it in my power to inflict pain on you at any moment and to whatever degree I choose. If you tell me any lies or attempt to prevaricate in any way or even fall below your usual level of intelligence, you will cry on pain instantly. Do you understand that?" "Yes," said Winston. O'Brien's manner became less severe. He resettled his spectacles thoughtfully and took a pace or two up and down. When he spoke, his voice was gentle and patient. He had the air of a doctor, a teacher, even a priest, anxious to explain and persuade rather than to punish. "I am taking trouble with you, Winston," he said, "because you are worth trouble. You know perfectly well what is the matter with you. You have known it for years, though you have fought against the knowledge. You are mentally deranged. You suffer from a defective memory. You are unable to remember real events, and you persuade yourself that you remember other events which never happened. Fortunately, it is curable. You have cured yourself of it. You've never cured yourself of it because you did not choose to. There was a small effort of the will that you were not ready to make. Even now, I am well aware you are clinging to your disease under the impression that it is a virtue. Now we will take an example. At this moment, which power is at war with? At this moment, which power is Oceania at war with?" So Brian says that Winston is mentally deranged. Do you think that this is true, or is this a tactic? That's a good question. Winston is the only person in this book who thinks and remembers events, and we are the people who are receiving that knowledge from Winston only. And here this party person is coming and saying that Winston is deranged and that none of these events are true, and that he is holding on to this belief that his ability to remember these false events is a virtue. And Winston thinks that, he says, well, no, I have to remain. In part 1, he talks about how he's starting to feel kind of crazy, but he knows these facts to be for real, and he knows them to be certainly true, and so he wants to hold on to that because that's the only thing keeping him sane is these memories that he has. And here O'Brien is saying, well, that's what makes you crazy, that you're holding on to these things that aren't real. Okay, so at this moment, which power is Oceania at war with? And then Winston says, when I was arrested, Oceania was at war with East Asia. With East Asia, good. And Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, has it not? Winston drew in his breath. He opened his mouth to speak, and then did not speak. He could not take his eyes away from the dial. The truth, please, Winston. Your truth. Tell me what you think you remember. I remember that until only a week before I was arrested, we were not at war with East Asia at all. We were in alliance with them. The war was against Eurasia that had lasted for 4 years. Before that, O'Brien stopped him with a movement of the hand. So he's asking him who Oceania is at war with, and we know that during Hate Week, the battle changed. Because remember, all the banners were wrong, and they had to change all the banners because and then they said, oh, the spies must have messed us up, and it's the spies' fault that all these are wrong. And so Winston knows that the battle has changed hands, but he's not supposed to remember that. He's supposed to remember it exactly how the party says, which is Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. There has never been a change, and the only way that there would have been any sort of indicator that this was different was because the spies of Goldstein messed them up somehow. Okay.